Thank you. Mr. Chairman, throughout what could be termed as a fiasco of the of the proposal to put this development in place, McSherrystown Borough and its residents have been nothing short of an afterthought for all those involved. Our McSherrystown Borough Council, not the least of which our Planning and Zoning Committee, was not officially informed by either developer or Conewago Township that any part of this proposed area included the borough, which is why, after being asked in passing by our former zoning officer if McSherrystown wanted input on it, I responded, and I quote, "As far as I am aware, the development is not in Conewago Township, and when and if we are presented with plans to review, we would do so." The fact that anyone, even passively knowing the well-documented severity of the situation in terms of traffic congestion in McSherrystown, would approve not one, but two developments within a half a mile of the borough is not only grossly irresponsible, it should elicit anger and outrage from every resident of the general community. Every person who has had to deal with the impossible driving situation on Pennsylvania Route 116, traveling either to or from Gettysburg and Hanover through our wonderful borough, and who, myself included, can't seem to understand why past councils and PennDOT have claimed several times over the past 40 years that there isn't a need or their traffic studies don't warrant a signal or mitigation plan. The only reason I can come up with is that Eisenhower Drive was the motivation for inaction. That placing a solution in McSherrystown would indeed highlight that the desire for that road was overwhelmingly political. To them, benefits outweighed the responsibility of those entities and individuals who had the responsibility to govern properly. Now seeing how this traffic situation is increasingly worsened over that span, and apparently ignoring the ridiculous effects of their plans to not only propose, but to irresponsibly approve more development places, suspicion as to the decision to exacerbate that problem, no worries, the bypass will fix it. When the development plans were finally in fact provided to McSherrystown, and the borough did its due diligence in reviewing them, it was pointed out by both this committee, as well as the safety committee, and the engineer of the borough, that the construction of certain aspects, including sidewalks, did not meet well-established ordinances. The response from the developer wasn't to seek to fix the issues and bring them into compliance. No, they acted like 5-year-olds, not getting a toy they wanted on the shelf at Walmart, immediately filing litigation against the borough, claiming that we had not responded in a time allotted by law. I fervently dispute that, as our borough's Planning and Zoning Committee and Safety Committees met within 2 weeks of receiving the plans. And with those committees providing feedback, the entire council voted to draft a letter outlining the shortcomings and requesting a reply by the developer to the concerns. To date, the only response has been, 1, to file a lawsuit, 2, to remove everything from the borough limits with the exception of an unlit crosswalk within the borough, and threatening if the committee did not approve that plan, they would not only continue their litigation, but also put the entirety of the original proposal back in, including what prompted the original denial. Mr. Chairman, I find it abhorrent that we see yet again another example of a developer and neighboring municipality representatives that place financial gain above the safety and best interest of the community. It's yet another example of using the courts to bully a municipality into submitting to a developer's demand. It's time that cycle stops. Thank you.
Thank you. With the people on the list, we start with Tom Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll do my best to get through this in 3 minutes. I came before this board, this body here, in September, I think it was, when you first had your first meeting on this matter. I encouraged everyone on the board then to look at the zoning hearing testimony that was provided in Conewago Township in August of 2020. This parcel was, for many years, agriculture. A board in 2019 changed it to residential. The board in 2020 changed it back to agriculture. The developer slipped in the plan a few days before the ordinance to change it back to agriculture was effective. Now there is a doctrine known as the pending ordinance doctrine that I think the township could have relied on. I was on the board at the time in the township, but they chose not to use that doctrine. There was concerns about how much it would actually help the township. But as that plan evolved over 2 years, there were numerous extensions, numerous waivers. But the testimony given in August of 2020, undisputed evidence in that testimony, and I hope you've all had a chance to read that. That's why I came to this board in September and encouraged you to read that. Those tracts of land there should never be developed, and there's overwhelming evidence to support that. One in particular that will affect the borough is the degradation, further degradation of the Plum Creek. You will be flooded. Front Street will be flooded considerably. The water quality of the Plum Creek will be diminished even more than what it is now, and you should take a serious look at that, even though the Plum Creek, as it impacts the borough, is not necessarily in this plan. The effects from this plan will certainly have impacts on the borough. Mr. Colgan mentioned the 116. This proposal was made, and PennDOT gave an approval for a highway occupancy permit. At the same time, they were saying Route 116 was categorized as a letter F on the highway rating system, meaning it's a terrible highway and it's overburdened and so on, and therefore we need a bypass. While all that was going on, they're approving a highway occupancy permit to come out onto 116, which they never should have had, because there's not enough front footage between Centennial Road and the Saves driveway. There's only 900 feet. By PennDOT's own standards, it takes 1,000 feet to get a highway occupancy permit. But PennDOT, in their wisdom, said, well, we'll let them put up a gate, and we'll say it's for emergency services only, and we'll give them the highway occupancy permit. As of right now, as far as I know, there's only one way in and one way out of that development. That is at the intersection of 116 and Centennial Road. That is going to put a tremendous burden on the borough. So you're going to have traffic issues, flooding issues,
please.
and the borough should take that into consideration. I do want to make sure that you understand that the testimony that was given in August of 2020 by those who were opposed to it was undisputed. No one disputed the experts that gave testimony, and you should certainly take that into consideration. I would encourage the borough. By the way, the township did make this plan approval contingent upon the borough's approval for numerous reasons, and so I think the borough does have the obligation to respond, and I think the overwhelming answer should be that the borough should not approve this development.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Glenn Boring? Okay. Wes, I'm going to ask you a question. When they're done, I was going to make sure I include you in. So, but unless if you have something now, I can.
I have nothing right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mrs. Ryan?
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I have brought some folders. Mr. Weaver, I want you to know that I did provide this council, I dropped off a full notebook of all the testimony that took place on the 20th. I did purchase this for $45. This is the site plan for when it was Arrows Point, but now it's Eagles Rock. And it cost me $45 to get it. This is a transparency problem in the state of Pennsylvania. I've lived other places where these plans are in the newspaper, and every resident knows about it, and it's in the newsletter. That doesn't happen here. We are totally cloaked in secrecy. This is the Chapel Meadows plan, and by the way, this developer pulled it out, sold it, this property. So this has changed. But someone else wants to develop it. I'm going to give you the reasons that you legally can deny this developer this proposal. First of all, in their submission to the Adams County Planning Board, there is a subdivision and land development dashboard, and on it, Conewago is the only municipality mentioned. When they applied on June 30th, 2020, it was called Arrows Point. Racehorse LLC, they were the applicant, that's Myers. the municipality, Conewago Township. Nowhere is it McSherrystown. Then again, on September 22nd, 21st, they submitted again, called under Eagle Rock. Racehorse Road LLC, Myers was the applicant. Municipality, Conewago. Nowhere does it say McSherrystown. Now, that's interesting. So why was McSherrystown left out? Well, you know, I listened to all the Conewago meetings. They're on Facebook, and I distinctly heard them say, Myers told them that McSherrystown was deferring the decision to Conewago Township. That could be probably found on one of their tapes. Next, let's see what else I'm going to tell you. Okay. The applicant submitted nowhere as McSherrystown. Why were they excluded? Now, this road, the new access road will be Hanover Road at the intersection of Centennial and Hanover Borough, Hanover Borough will provide the public sewer and water. What is more interesting about the Eagle Rock request is the extension for the preliminary plan deadline to July 18th, 2023. On Monday night, at the Board of Supervisors meeting at Conewago Township.
I'm gonna have to ask you this.
Okay, this is really important.
Okay.
They asked for an extension for July 18th, 2023. And they're here tonight bullying you and demanding a decision. You owe it to the people here to say no. This is the most horrendous, unbelievable, just absolutely destruction to this community. There should be a class action suit by the citizens if they put it in, because it will destroy the community. Where is the public interest? Where is it? The builders and the land speculators should not have total control. American Disabilities Act, not even included. And they made a lot of mistakes in the zoning that they did on 2022 in the township. I will leave you with this. I am going to beg you to study more and look at all the documentation, and I have provided you testimony from SAVES of what they say about how this would do to them, and from the Lower Susquehanna Riverkeeper, and I hope you see all the letters from people. This is a political road, and let me tell you, walkability matters. It's public safety. Public safety is important, and good communities have it. I really think you should give people more than 3 minutes. They get hours and hours to present their plans, and public comment is just squelched. Thank you, but really and truly, you owe it. You are the elected officials. They are not. And the people in Adams County, they're the deep state. They're appointed by the commissioners. You are the elected officials. Why have elections if you can't vote and they tell you no? You have to do it, because that's what they tell you. I've been dealing with developers and zoning my entire life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vote no.
Mr. Popovich, Bill, do you have?
Yes, sir. In 1960 parlance, we have brought diz-aids. So that way I don't eat up a whole lot of minutes. So it kind of speaks for itself. The chairman said public outrage. We're outraged. Overdevelopment brings you sky-high school taxes. I can hardly wait. We can barely pay them now. And if Conewago Township, where I live, bless their hearts, if they had it their way, we'd have about 7 or 8 more developments. That would price me out of the market and 95% of the people who live here. 40-year moratorium. I'd love to hear that walk across the new governor's desk. Speaks for itself. Builders are bullies and bulldozers, you think? The building industry shows up with millions and millions and millions, maybe billions. I don't have that kind of money, but the way it works is we got money, it means we're better than you. I'm getting tired of that. Let's unroll this. We tried to show this at the last Conewago Township meeting, and now that we have cameras, we want you to know This is the gospel truth. Our wonderful friends up north that love me so much, they give developers anything they want. And I tell you, when I walk in there, I can feel the daggers coming my way. And that's from 4 out of 5 supervisors. They don't have any right to do that, but they do. It is a hostile environment because the way things work over there is builders are good people and you're bad. Got that? Builders are good, you're bad. And that's the way things work around here. I don't like it.
We should also try to find out where they're getting their money from. Is it coming from China?
Okay, thanks, Mr. Popovich.
Anytime.
We'll get this back. We're gave you a little bit of a shirt.
Thanks, Bill.
Ray Dillon, do you have anything to say? It's just, you don't need to, but signing.
Sorry?
If you signed up here, you have an opportunity to say something, that's all.
Oh, I
Okay.
thought that was just a.
You don't have
regular
to.
signage.
No, it's really just so that when we get the minutes together, that we have names.
Oh, I have an
Right.
opinion for sure.
Okay. Brian Walls.
My name is Brian Walls. I'm sure some of you don't know who I am. Some of you might. I'm probably the youngest one in here. I don't mean anything by that. This whole town development affects me very much. I have a young family. I have little kids. I know what this new development would do for traffic in Main Street here. It's a pain in the butt to cross Main Street as it is, and you want to add more traffic to it? Is that what you want to do? Don't do that, you know? Don't. You're going to make it worse for everybody, and me and my family. A lot of people here have already done their research on how bad everything is going to get. Congestion, the water, probably even reaction for saves, how burdened they're going to be with the entire area servicing it. You know, even Conewago Township is probably going to have to hire more officers to police all that. It's just ridiculous. I moved to this area because at the time, you know, when I was a kid, they didn't tax my dad's military retirement, and then I bought a home here. I bought a home here because this is all I know. I moved around the majority of my life, and this is where I settled with my wife and now my family. So I really encourage you folks to look at it also from my standpoint as the younger generation of what this is going to do to us. I don't really know all the facts. I feel like there's a lot of facts in this development that's going in, that's getting throwing around majority of it looks like it's Conewago Township to me. I don't really know how much really touches the borough other than we want a sidewalk. But, you know, let's make some common sense, considerable thoughts and decisions here. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have on the list, but I see a few people that aren't on. Anybody else have any comments? Okay, thanks, everybody. We'll get that over to Jess. I'd like to bring you guys can, I was expecting you folks to sit there, that's why I was almost afraid you weren't here. But anything, especially what you have to address anything, I think I've got a couple questions, but we'll have some questions to ask. But if you have, what's different from last, or is it the same?
Yeah, so we were here last in September. The plans that we have brought with us tonight are the same. There's one set of plans.
State your name.
Yeah,
Sure.
It's Peter Wirtz with McNeese, Wallace, and Nurk.
Thanks, sorry.
And to refresh your recollection, the one set of plans has a crosswalk within the PennDOT right-of-way. The other set of plans does not. The crosswalk within the right-of-way would be the only improvement, if you could call it that, proposed within the limits of the borough. The remainder of this development is within Conewago Township exclusively. Just also to refresh your recollection, this is a 90-acre property. There's 85 acres in Conewago Township, a 5-acre, more narrow type strip of land that crosses onto the borough side across Plum Creek. We have worked with the township beginning in our preliminary plan submission in 2020, worked diligently with the township to meet their ordinances and went through the land development process there. At a point during that process, we had reached out to McSherrystown Borough. At that point, McSherrystown Borough had indicated its willingness to defer the review of the plan to the township, which is consistent with the vast majority of land developments when you have a small swath of land that's located across a municipal boundary. Since that time, we have obtained conditional approval from Conewago Township after satisfying their ordinances. As I had mentioned, there are no improvements within McSherrystown Borough. We have complied with all applicable laws. We have received our NPDS permit. At this point, our plan is conditioned in Conewago Township upon McSherrystown Borough approving the plan, subject to McSherrystown Borough's ordinances, and there are no improvements proposed within the borough such that McSherrystown Borough cannot legally hold this plan anymore. And just a word on the expectations of a private property owner to come into a proposal, into a land development. There's laws in place. We're a country of laws. We have expectations in place for developers, businesses. We come in and we comply with those laws, but are being essentially held captive by the borough at this point, despite the borough not having any jurisdiction to not approve this plan. So that's where things stand this evening. We do have, as I'd mentioned, the two different sets of plans, but we are at this point entitled legally to an approval from the borough. We've worked diligently, as I mentioned, with the township throughout this process over the past several years.
As it comes to to everything, I wanted to kind of pass around to our experts. But Andy, now you've looked through the plans. Do these plans meet the zoning requirements and the ordinances? And do you have any suggestions or recommendations that we look at when we're doing this?
The only improvements that are within the borough right now from the plans that I saw was a crosswalk. That was it. And the crosswalk's within the PennDOT right of way, so the jurisdiction for that crosswalk, the borough doesn't have a specific requirement for crosswalks.
Okay.
And it would be within PennDOT, it's under the purview of PennDOT.
And a question I kind of have with that, I was gonna maybe ask later, but if we were going to get some visibility, kind of like the flashing lights or something that they have out in front of us, would that be PennDOT still? Okay.
Correct.
And would that take a study, or would that, and who would
That would be
start that?
there would be a separate HOP, or it would be included in the HOP. You've already obtained the HOP for the project?
It's underway.
It's underway, so they would have to revise the HOP to include, you know, the signalization for that.
I don't think the gentleman who was here last time is here tonight, but he mentioned that, well, there is some drawback possibly of putting in a crosswalk, and if people feel entitled to that space, they might walk out in front of traffic, and it could cause more accidents than it prevents.
Yeah, it could be
So-
something, you know, a signal is one option. There are other options within the PennDOT design manual, you know, signage. So you have different signs leading up to where the crosswalk is to point out the crosswalk.
And to Justin, is that something that we could ask for in conjunction with this, or is it something?
So the way Pennsylvania law is set up is those type of conditions on the plan you can approve the plan based on those conditions.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be something that can hold up the plan.
Okay. I guess now, Wes, anything that, from your purview, from zoning enforcement?
Unfortunately, I would have to echo what the developer says here. There's no development proposed in the borough. And being that there's no development proposed in the borough, there are no zoning codes to compare it to,
I understand.
because there's no improvements made on that parcel. My only concern was the floodplain itself, and I understand they submitted a report that
And
shows.
you say, I don't see it right now, but I know I've seen it earlier in the week. It went, as I went through for the different things, the graphs looked relatively the same for the different, 1, 2, 5, 10, 25, 50, and
I'm not
100
an
years.
engineer, so I'm not gonna say I understand.
But the scales were different for the bigger storms. I understood that, that part of it.
Are you referring to the stormwater management
Yeah,
report?
yeah.
Typical stormwater management reports require that you hold the water that is discharged from the site, for storms from small one-year storms
Yeah.
to the larger 100-year storms. Those are held down to below pre-development,
Okay.
rates of flow.
I thought I saw that too.
That's what the stormwater management report basically says, along with some reduction in the volume of the water that comes off the site, so that we don't cause problems downstream from our site.
Okay. Because, I did see, like, for all of them, there was a peak, and then
There is.
it went down, but,
A lot of graphs.
and we had, just 2 years ago or so, we had a 50-year flood probably, I think it was a 50.
Correct, and
And
we're not stopping the frequency of the rainstorms.
I-
We're just holding back the water that hits our property.
I do have a question in regards to that. Just to point out the fact that you go through and place this development in place and flooding increases in the area adjacent to the development. What are your responsibilities after the fact?
We are designing this so that we do not cause flooding.
I understand you're designing it that way, but if it does happen, what are your responsibilities?
It will not be our fault, so we will not have responsibility.
So you're okay.
Where does your
Now-
stormwater discharge at?
It discharges into the wetland on our side of the creek,
And the wetland overflows
into Plum Creek.
into Plum Creek. I would encourage the borough members to read the testimony about the Plum Creek. And that's the whole linchpin with the degradation of the Plum Creek. The water that they are going to produce, runoff they're gonna produce, even though it may be called initially in a floodplain, is only gonna end up in the Plum Creek. And the Plum Creek is already well below national standards in terms of quality and in terms of the ability to handle the water that's already going into it. And that's a very important testimony. That testimony was given, you may have seen the gentleman, Mr. Evangelistas, who's with the River Keepers. He's very knowledgeable. And his testimony was not disputed by anyone. His testimony is basically telling the borough of McSherrystown, you will have significant flooding problems if this development is built.
I've read the testimony. It specifically does, and it does say that.
And if we're, I'm sorry, Tom, you kind of interjected yourself.
I'm sorry.
If that's the case, then why didn't Conewago vote against it?
Political.
For the same reason they allowed the development in the first place.
Well, it was a 3-2 vote. And I can't answer for the other members. But the other point I want to mention is that in the fall of 2021, when I was still on the board, our engineer made it very clear to the developer that the borough of McSherrystown's engineer must review the plans. And when that plan was passed by the township conditionally in January of 2022, a year ago, by the way, that has since expired. That's why they were there asking for an extension Monday night. The township again said, your plan approval is conditioned upon the borough's review and approval of your plan, because 5 acres is in the borough. That 5 acres is floodplain, and that floodplain with the runoff is going to contribute to an enormous problem in the borough of McSherrystown. The developer was told that as early, I think, as the summer of 2021, but I know in the fall of 2021.
And let's be clear, the original plans it's been discussed here tonight, the only thing that's gonna happen is a crosswalk within the PennDOT right-of-way. When this plan was originally given to McSherrystown, that was not the original plan.
The
There
original
was,
plan showed nothing in the borough.
I'm sorry, sir.
Nothing.
It
It
am I
showed
wrong?
nothing. I wrote the plan up.
Where did the sidewalks?
came
I don't know
back-
if that was the original
The
plan.
original
was not
plan
the
didn't
original
have it,
plan.
and then
And then-
Conowanga Township wanted them to put it in. and,
Right.
you know,
Right, and
We-
then it came here and,
The very original plan.
So they could,
right, so the
there
very
was,
original-
there was a walking path
There
in
was a
there.
walking
in
path,
for
there was a
time.
16-inch
second.
sidewalk.
The sequence went like this. First, we had no walking path. At that point, we gave the plans as a courtesy for a review to the borough. I got back a response saying that they would defer. We continued along. The township then indicated that they would like a pathway. So we put one on, connected it across the bridge, put some in the borough, it came back to the borough, said, now we've had a change, do you still want to defer?
Oh.
At that point in time, the engineer, we went back and forth a little bit. It looked like the pathway was not viable, it was not wanted in the township, problems getting across the bridge. We removed it. Now we have a crosswalk that allows people who are on the north side, where we have a sidewalk, we have a bridge crossing, to get back across. Although I would note that crosswalk at that location is somewhat contraindicated by PennDOT standards, and you know, that's what's on the plan today.
Okay, I'd just like to ask, it's been stated twice now by you two individuals that we deferred. Where are you basing that on?
I spoke with TJ Murrin. Do you remember him?
I know exactly who it is.
All right, TJ Murrin, I went through him first, submitted plans. He contacted somebody in the borough
Yep.
and then got back to me. I have the emails where he got back to me and said, they don't feel a need to review it.
Why?
I'm not a borough councilman, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a matter of routine when there's no improvements in
The
an adjacent
converse,
municipality.
but there were at the time TJ made that statement.
There were none.
There were none at that
The only
time.
plans that I've seen are the ones originally with the scape that goes across with the pathway and with the sidewalk. And then after that, you came back to the last meeting and said, we've taken it all out and we're gonna put a crosswalk in, and that's it.
We initially sought a waiver from the requirement for sidewalk on the south side from the township. The township, as opposed to a waiver, wanted to do the route of a modification, and that's when the pathway was put onto the plan. The pathway then was put on the plan such that it came across the bridge and extended onto the borough side. After the borough indicated that it did not want the pathway, we eliminated it, went back to the township and said, can we get this waiver for the sidewalk? Also, PennDOT wants everything to stay on the north side. They granted us the waiver, we took it back off the plan, which is the current rendition of the plan that we have today. And if I may speak to the earlier situation with McSherrystown Borough, as I had mentioned, when there's no improvements in a development, I mean, we're not even talking about a development, we're talking about a parcel, a development parcel, when it's situated in two municipalities, and only a portion is in a different municipality. It's a matter of routine for a deferral to happen where the neighboring municipality defers to the jurisdiction of the municipality with the development. In this case, that's what the understanding was early on. Now that signature still needs to be on the plan, and when Conewago Township approved the plan conditioned upon McSherrystown Borough, it was thought of to be a matter of routine at that point because a portion of the property, and by virtue of the property, a portion of the subdivision is happening, implicates the borough. So that's really the genesis of that. It was not McSherrystown Borough, you know, it's the ball's in your court to go through a full plan review process. That was not the intent at the time. It was simply a condition as a matter of routine.
Joe, I haven't heard anything. You have any questions or concerns or?
Well, the
I don't want to put you on the spot. I just wanted to make sure you had a
pathway,
chance.
the pathway we felt was good, other than just making the width suitable to our
Ordinances.
ordinances.
Yeah, our specs.
The guardrails, there's guardrails on that side of the bridge that could be removed, and that would widen the walkway through there, and it should be an easy fix.
But they're not,
That-
they're not,
Yeah, but-
obliged to reintroduce that, are they?
Well, that's, that would be the better of the two choices versus a crosswalk where we could have people that are crossing at the crosswalk, endanger themselves thinking that they have the right of way. If they don't have to cross the street.
If I might, one of the problems with that, and we did think of it, was that PennDOT is unlikely to allow us to take the guide rail off of that bridge and put it out into the roadway. It's on the bridge for a reason. So we wouldn't necessarily be given that approval.
Well, there's no guide rail on the other side of the bridge, so that's where, it just doesn't make sense to me that there's a guide rail on one side and not on the other.
That would be something we'd have to talk to PennDOT about. I'm not sure why it was put there either.
Well, at this point, I do want to ask just for clarification. Are you proposing with the crosswalk or without, or do you have one of each?
We can comply with either one. We have plans here that can be, that one set has and one set does not.
Oh,
We can.
okay. So, are there any more?
The problem with Plan A was, which means the guardrail, Joe removing the guardrail, is the fact that there's not enough room to comply with borough ordinances in regards to the width of the sidewalk.
Right.
So taking the guardrail off doesn't necessarily get you to that point.
The bridge is not part of McSherrystown Borough.
Okay, but there are sidewalks in the borough of McSherrystown that were included in this.
At one point.
Were,
just-
but right now,
That's what
again,
I'm saying. If we're-
the
if you're-
proposals that are up now, neither of them have that path.
Correct.
So I'm gonna kinda ask, are we ready for a vote on one of the plans? Do we have a motion to vote?
Can I
on
add one other thing, Mr. Chairman? If you don't.
Quickly, please.
Okay. So I'm not sure when these emails were about deferrals of the borough deferring to the township. But I can tell you, as a member of the board in Conewago Township, in the summer or early fall of 2021, the developer was informed that the borough of McSherrystown must approve the plan. Not a crosswalk, not a part of the plan, because 5 acres was in the borough. That 5 acres was floodplain, and that was going to be impacted by this development. And therefore, the borough's engineer needed to review the entire plan, if nothing else, to look at what was going to happen to the floodplain and what would ultimately happen within the borough of McSherrystown. And I'm not sure that's happened yet.
And if anything, I've got a question for Justin. Is that the way things work?
Well,
Does each municipality have to approve the whole plan or just the parts that are in their
So,
municipality?
the way Pennsylvania law is set up is, and there's case law to support it, is you're basically looking at your municipality and your constituents in that municipality for that portion of the development. In this case, and in most cases, like what he's saying, it is a deferral to the majority. If there's zoning, and usually it's where access to the road is, for the most part, or where the main development is where a lot of that is going to be looked at, and that's all in the Conewago side.
Okay.
Well, there's also impacts, it's not just the fact that there's nothing being developed, it's that the development is causing impacts
Correct.
in the borough. And council, I think that, not an attorney, but I've dealt many years with zoning and land use issues, and an impact is something that is fair game.
And I think you heard tonight, basically, we're gonna do what we have to do to get the development done, but gotta help the people who live down the stream from this thing if it goes dry. And that's who we represent.
So when the subdivisions start filing suits, the public side's filing suits,
Yeah.
then the borough councils and the township will start realizing they need to do a lot more work. They need to hold their engineers and their solicitors accountable for the work that they do as well, because there are even conflicts of interest. solicitors work for this borough and they work for this township. There are a lot of problems with these plans. And they're dog and pony shows over there when they do them. We don't have one engineer or one CPA on that board over there.
Okay. I do think, actually, you hadn't said anything, so go ahead.
Ray Dillon, I happen to sit on the zoning committee, but I would have thought at this point in the game that the developers, engineers would have had to file some kind of environmental impact statement or study outlining, what they were going to do to mitigate the downstream effects of what they're going to do on that property.
And wasn't that the
Stormwater management
Stormwater
report
management.
does that.
plan that, from what I gather, again, it's a few pages of narrative and a lot of graphs of different storms and for the different basins, but it asserts that it's going to be at least as good a runoff as it is right now.
Correct. It has water volume, water quality, and rate control in the design. So the rate of water coming off the property will be at most the same as it is in the pre-development. We generally fall under a bit. The volume, there's volume controls to reduce the volume, and there's some very large basins that let the water sit in there to drop sediment, to get some bioremediation, and to infiltrate in and recharge the groundwater. So those aspects were in the design prior to approval.
But the water quality is not the quality of the Plum Creek. The water quality is the quality that you're catching in your retention ponds, which ultimately will end up in the Plum Creek, which already has very bad water quality that was given in expert testimony, and these folks did not refute that. They did not refute that. No one refuted the expert testimony that this development will destroy the Plum Creek. Please keep that in mind. No one refuted that, and there was ample opportunity to do that. And the expert that gave that testimony is nationally renowned for his expertise on water quality.
And again, I have to
Tell me-
again, I have to go back to, then why didn't it convince enough members of Conewaga Township?
Or DEP, we had our
We have it in.
NPDES permit issued, there was no comment as to this.
I can't answer that,
Situation.
Chairman.
And that's an arm, that's arm of the Department of
There was
Environmental
a,
Protection.
there was a 3-2 vote to change it back to agriculture, and.
But my understanding is that was after the purchase of the land. So this land was purchased as residential because it was changed for the previous owner's preference for a better price, and that makes perfect sense to me. These people bought that land to make it residential, and the township attempted to change it back to agricultural.
Township did change it back to agriculture, but the plan was submitted 2 days before the change in the
The
ordinance.
plan was in the
And-
works
and
for many,
To be honest,
a long time
my
before that.
problem is you think it would be okay to change it back under, pulling the rug out from under them.
Yes, because the testimony that was given was overwhelming. It should have never been changed. The argument was it should have never
I
been changed.
understand. I kind of agree with that.
And
But
so-
they bought after the change to residential. Where is their loss? Who would make them whole after they paid residential prices for something that's going to be turned back to agriculture?
Well, who's gonna make?
And who's
You know,
gonna
I
make- who's gonna
understand
make
these
the
are
residents
problems.
of Main Street
These
whole?
are problems.
When this
But
is
to
all
be
done.
honest, they're Conewaga Township problems.
No, actually,
No,
they're not.
Well, no, they're problems in the process
they're problems
that
that-
happened in Conewaga Township.
They're problems that
And
Conewaga
people want
Township are
us
inflicting
to-
on McSherrystown.
But
And
the
people
end-
want us to
but the
find a
end-
loophole to bail them out.
And I don't disagree with any of that, Chairman, but the end result is there are gonna be problems in the borough as well. And the testimony is just irrefutable on that.
And what are you gonna say to the residents that come to us after the fact and after all these things possibly happen? And again, we can only say possibly. They can't guarantee it's not gonna happen.
And
We
you
can't
can't
guarantee
guarantee
that
it
it is
is.
going to happen. Well, what I wanna say to you is, what are you gonna say to the people in McSherrystown who live in that area when it does happen? Are you gonna say to them, we didn't have the chance to do something about this, so we skirted our responsibility? We're not doing that. I'm not doing that.
I have pictures on my phone when the Plum Creek flooded in September 21. That water was coming uptown. It was coming almost up to where my street is and my house. My whole basement would have been flooded, and that's without any more development.
Bill, let me answer one question that you raised there. The proposal to change that zoning back was talked about by candidates that were running for election just a month or two after it was changed in 2019. Those candidates took office in 2020, and immediately when they took office in March, because there was some court wranglings to determine who was going to sit on the board, they immediately filed the necessary paperwork and notification that they were going to change it back. And that hearing, so that was in March. So these folks knew in advance that there were candidates that wanted to change it, a majority of candidates. That majority got on the board and in fact did change it in March. And they still rushed to put, now zoning takes time to change because you got to advertise, you got to have hearings and so on. They rushed their plan in time to beat that zoning change. And the plan was, quite frankly, very haphazard. I mentioned in my testimony here this evening, there were numerous waivers that they requested, numerous extensions that they requested, because they submitted a haphazardous plan to beat the zoning regulation that was changing back. That's what you have here.
And then I'm gonna probably would have to go to Andy and Wes, and do you see that haphazardness?
On these plans?
Yes.
I do not.
And that's what's before us now.
You
So,
should defer it because they've asked for extension. You don't have to give them the answer tonight. They're asking for extensions. They've been asking for waivers and
So
extensions.
they didn't ask for this extension. It was Conowagga Township that asked for the extensions, and then they grant the extensions. That's how it works under the.
And I will say this to illustrate this point. If this property, if at the outset, the 5 acres that are in McSherrystown Borough were subdivided off of the 85 in Conowagga Township, there would be no jurisdiction for McSherrystown Borough over the 85 acres in Conowagga Township. There are no improvements proposed. There's case law by the courts of Pennsylvania supporting the proposition that a neighboring municipality cannot withhold land development approval when they do not have any improvements in their municipality. The fact of the matter is we are being held captive by the borough by virtue of this plan, the routine plan signature, without which we cannot receive our approval, unconditional approval from the township.
He mentioned developments, and I think it'd be prudent for the borough's solicitor to do the research, not just on developments in a neighboring municipality, but impacts to a neighboring municipality. And I bet you'll find a whole different set of case law.
That was my question. Thank you.
So Pennsylvania case law requires that in order to deny a plan, it needs to be in violation of the borough's ordinance. There's nothing on their plan that is currently in violation of the borough's ordinance. So you would need to cite specific reasons and the ordinance number and section to deny the plan. Speculation as to certain things that could happen in the future, there's Pennsylvania case law that says that is not a valid reason for denying a plan.
Well, the testimony of the zoning change in August of 2020 is not applicable here then?
It's
Because one of your colleagues, we were ready, we thought we'd get a lawsuit on changing that back. The township did. Now, the concept was we'll keep deferring the hearing until we get to the point of plan approval to save money. But we were convinced from one of your colleagues that we would win if that zoning change was contested, that we would win based upon the expert testimony that we had provided in that zoning hearing.
But we're not talking about zoning change here. We have a plan in front of us, and that's what the Pennsylvania case law states.
Yes, but it was compelling as to the impacts, and I would think it would still be compelling as to the impacts, though. That's my point.
so what are our paths forward?
They have a plan in front of us, and we have to
Okay.
act on it.
So I believe at this point, we're going to put the plan up for a vote. Now, again, since it's been a few minutes, I want to be clear. Does it have the crosswalk or not? Or do we need to propose which one?
That's up to
Yeah,
you.
they have plans in front of
Okay.
them. And they're talking the crosswalk simply across 116.
Right at
Right.
Front
Oh, I'm
Street.
talking about, I'm talking about the one in McSherrystown, but on 116, which is PennDOT's purview.
And if you were to vote on the crosswalk being placed within the right of way, the borough would have to serve as the applicant for PennDOT. We would obviously do the work, but
Okay.
to obtain the permit from PennDOT, the borough would have to be the applicant.
And you guys would prepare all those documents and everything, it would just need to sign off.
Yes.
And I'd like to point out, just so everybody hears, this is an unlighted, marked crosswalk with reflective tape, correct? Is what you're proposing. Unlighted, just,
Plastic.
So the crosswalk, the borough can put a crosswalk because it's at an intersection. You could put one down today. You don't need anything from PennDOT. If, what we're proposing, if you want to put a crosswalk there, there's no ADA ramps, so that's what we would propose, and that's what we would say, that you would have to apply for the HOP only for the ramps. The crosswalk doesn't have to be permitted. And I've spoken with PennDOT, and this is not a place where they would permit a light. You can ask for it. You can submit a request, but they're not going to do it.
this is the same PennDOT that says that McSherrystown's 116 doesn't need a light or any traffic mitigation, so.
All I can say, I spoke to Eric Heiner at PennDOT, and he said because site distance is good, they won't allow a traffic signal for pedestrians here. So it would be for ADA ramps and a crosswalk.
Let the first person get hit and killed there, and we'll see what happens.
Well, with that, I do think I'm planning on proposing that we vote on the plan without the crosswalk. So that at the moment, there would be no path, no crosswalk.
So you're suggesting that you remove the crosswalk from the plan altogether, and there to be no pedestrian, traffic walks at all?
It will be the same as it exists today,
Correct.
Right.
which
With
has,
400 or 350 new cars going past.
20 each side.
Okay.
And that's what they're going.
I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if you can actually make the motion. Someone else will have to make the motion.
If that could be true. Is that right? Okay. Then I can't make a motion. So I'm awaiting a motion of either of those, if possible.
I'll make a motion that we approve the plans without the crosswalk.
With 3 people, we need a second?
Second,
Okay.
if nobody else will second it.
Then I'm going to second it. So I believe we're ready for a roll call vote.
Smith,
Yes.
Joe Von Sauce,
Yes.
and Dan Colgan.
Emphatically no.
Okay. Yeah, before we adjourn though, Wes, Andy, Jess, if you'd stick around, if there's anything we need to sign, you folks too, and we'll figure out what to do next with this. Thanks everyone for all your input, all your time. I know this last little bit seemed perfunctory, but it wasn't. There was compelling stuff on both sides of this. So thank you all.
You just vote yes?
Yes, I did.
Somebody couldn't hear what you
Yes,
voted.
sorry, I did. My sign is